that some are flat to 1/10,000th of an inch. The Great Sphinx of Giza was supposedly built around 2500 BCE by Pharaoh Khafre, yet just 80 years later it was already buried in the sand and had to be dug out. A puzzling detail that raises serious questions within mainstream archaeology. Alright, welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, Benefactor, and today we're taking a break from coils and capacitors to talk about something ancient, sacred, and let's be honest, way more high-tech than anything we've got now. I'm talking about Kemet, not Egypt, Kemet, the real name of the civilization that built the pyramids, carved the Sphinx, and understood energy in ways we're only beginning to remember. This episode is inspired by Stephen Mehler, a researcher who studied ancient wisdom from indigenous Egyptian teachers. And what he learned flips the whole story of Egypt upside down. Get ready to take a deep dive into the secrets of the Saqqara. Alright, so they didn't call it Egypt. According to Stephen Mehler, the people who built the pyramids didn't call the land Egypt. That name comes from the Greeks, Aegyptos, a distorted version of Hut-Kat-Ta, which means the place where the souls of Ta lives. But the locals, they called it Kemet, which means the black land, referring to the rich dark silt of the Nile. And when they weren't focused on tombs, dynasties, and conquest either. That came much later. Kemet was a matriarchal civilization, not in a modern political sense, but in a cultural and spiritual one. You see, the most powerful people in Kemet were women. In Kemet, you didn't just become king because your dad was one. You had to be chosen through the female line. You had to marry into the bloodline of power. The term pharaoh actually comes from Pert-A, meaning great house, referring to the queen's house. So technically, kings were more like consorts or co-managers rather than actual rulers. This wasn't a society obsessed with ruling either. It was a society obsessed with balance. Nature, energy, stars, sound, water, and life. So let's talk about the pyramids for a minute. Because according to many researchers, including engineer Christopher Dunn and researcher Stephen Mehler, the pyramids weren't actually tombs. Now, we've all heard the official story. The pyramids were just tombs for kings, except there were no mummies found in any major pyramids, no inscriptions in the Great Pyramids, no burial texts of any sort, nothing that screams this is where someone important laid to rest. Stephen Mehler called them Pernitur, which means house of nature's force. He said the pyramids were part of a giant energy system. Similar to engineer Christopher Dunn's theory, Mehler suggests the pyramids acted as a literal power plant that used underground water, acoustics, chemistry, and resonance to generate and transmit energy. At Saqqara, there are 300-meter-long tunnels under the step pyramid, used to channel water from underground aquifers. According to Mehler, these weren't sewers, these were water energy systems. The Great Pyramid was made of limestone to conduct vibrations. Inside rose granite, full of quartz, which amplifies sound and energy. In the Queen's chamber, there are acid marks, suggesting chemical reactions took place, such as hydrogen production. So imagine this. Water from underground is pumped up, sound is resonating through the stone, chemical reactions are triggered in the chambers, and the whole structure is humming like a tuning fork wrapped in sacred geometry. That's not a tomb, ladies and gentlemen, that's a machine. And just to add, these blocks were cut with such precision that some are flat to 1/10,000th of an inch. It's like slicing thinner than a human fingernail, a feat that still baffles modern engineers. We can barely do that today, and yet some stones like the unfinished obelisk at Aswan weigh over 1,200 tons. We couldn't lift that with modern cranes, let alone carve it with such precision. Engineers like Christopher Dunn have a saying, and that saying is this: precision is not without function. If that level of precision was required for the job, there's usually a damn good reason for it. Now is our section on the Sphinx. Let's talk about it for a minute. The official story is that it was built by Khafre around 2500 BCE. But that story doesn't quite hold up. First of all, there are no inscriptions on the Sphinx linking Khafre to it. Second, the body is heavily eroded from water, not wind. Geologist Robert Schopp dated the erosion to at least 8000 BCE, or possibly older, back when Egypt had regular rainfall. Stephen Mehler said the Sphinx was originally a lioness, carved to honor the sky goddess Nut. Later dynasties recarved it into a male face, but forensic reconstructions show the face doesn't match Khafre at all. It has African female features. Oh, and get this, the dynastic Egyptians had to dig the Sphinx out of the sand just 80 years after it was supposedly built? Why would they need to do that if it was just built 80 years prior? The Great Sphinx of Giza was supposedly built around 2500 BCE by Pharaoh Khafre, yet just 80 years later it was already buried in the sand and had to be dug out? A puzzling detail that raises serious questions within mainstream archaeology. If the Sphinx was newly constructed and part of an active royal complex, why would it be abandoned so quickly? This inconsistency suggests that the Sphinx may be far older than mainstream Egyptology admits, possibly predating the dynastic Egyptians entirely and pointing to a lost civilization with advanced knowledge and forgotten history. In other words, the Sphinx wasn't actually theirs. Dynastic Egyptians inherited the Sphinx. So we have a picture I'm going to show you about the construction that they did with a model of the Sphinx, and it shows you how the Sphinx could have originally had the head of a lioness and then recarved with the same amount of stone that was there. So it's very interesting. It's just an image, but it gives you an idea of how it is possible to recarve that structure. But that was an image of the sculpture and how they could have recarved that Sphinx head using the same material. So now it gets even more interesting with the global connection. Stephen Mehler talked about a tomb at Saqqara that had what appeared to be Mayan glyphs on the wall. Now this is extremely important. He had images of it, but unfortunately the Tesla Tech video is very poor quality. I'm going to try to hunt down the actual images, see if I can get a higher quality image of the Mayan glyphs. But this wasn't Egyptian style writing, and Mayan being in Egypt is significant, historically. Now this wasn't just some tourist carving his name in the corner. Stephen said he was snuck in by a guide who took him through a restricted zone, not open to the public. Deep inside a chamber, he saw a wall relief unlike anything he'd seen in Egypt before. He took a photograph, quickly and quietly, and later showed it to a glyph specialist. Without being told where it came from, the expert immediately said, "That's gotta be Mayan." Stephen then took a step further and showed it to a Mayan elder, Don Alejandro, who confirmed the symbols were real, authentic, and part of the Naga Mayan tradition. People who, according to their oral history, came across the water from a land to the east. Now, Alejandro did specify that the Mayan tradition, the oral tradition, said that the Mayans spread out in the four corners of the earth. So how do the Mayan glyphs show up in a tomb in Egypt? Well, it suggests that there was once a global civilization with shared knowledge about energy, sound, and divine science, something that Malcolm Bendel referred to and you'll see it in my video, The Real Flux Capacitor.
They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so